Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Mayor Bloomberg's racial profiling through stop and frisk policy in New York is taking more and more heat. The debate rivals stressing the policy was only pulled back under pressure. And tonight, we now go to the source, an expert and exclusive guest. Retired Judge Shira Shenlin, a 22-year veteran on the federal bench, ruled against Bloomberg's stop and frisk policy and is an expert on the exhaustive public record. The New York Times has reported over 5 million stops were made in Bloomberg's tenure. And in one year, for example, say 2011, 87% of those stops were people of color. The judge ruled the policy unconstitutional, finding it was, quote, indirect racial profiling, each stop a demeaning and humiliating experience for those mostly innocent individuals, and noting no one should live in fear of being stopped. This was a huge story. Remember a little bit of how it was all covered at the time.
Tonight, a federal judge has come down hard on one of the most controversial police tactics in the country, ordering changes to New York City's so-called stop and frisk policy.
The judge's scathing decision condemned the New York police.
The judge said that tens of thousands of New Yorkers had their rights systematically violated.
Today, the court called it what it is, which is racial profiling. Judge Shenlin is here on the beat. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. You spent years, up to 10 years, on all of these cases. You are literally one of the most knowledgeable experts in the country on this very controversial practice. What do people need to know about it, and what, if anything, was incorrect in last night's debate discussion?
Okay, so what they need to know is that the United States Supreme Court in Terry versus Ohio said you can stop and frisk people, but you have to have reasonable suspicion that a crime is being committed or about to be committed. That's the only basis for stopping and frisking somebody. In fact, the frisk part is that you have to believe you're in danger. Okay, that wasn't the case in these 5 million stops. The vast majority, there was no reasonable suspicion. There really wasn't. It appeared to me clear from the evidence that what we had was racial profiling, going after a target group, which was young black males, 18 to 25. That's what was going on. The police targeted themselves to those neighborhoods where they believed the crime was heaviest, but they also believed that's where the criminals were heaviest. So they went after these groups, and the stops were mostly dry. 90% of these stops resulted in no further law enforcement action. The frisks produced very little, if anything, 0.75 of 1%. Had anything, any contraband, any guns. So it really was a failed policy that terrorized, I would honestly say, not to mention humiliated, hundreds of thousands of young minority New Yorkers. And that's not a good thing, because
so that as policy, the mayor ran the policy in a way that you say terrorized people based on their race.
Yes, but I want to say the policy started before this mayor. It started with Mayor Giuliani. Bloomberg picked it up. Bloomberg expanded it enormously. It grew under him to its height in 2011.
And I'll say this, whether you do or not, as a former judge. Mayor Giuliani had a tough policy that was controversial on predominantly black neighborhoods in New York.
That's right.
And Mayor Bloomberg came in and said, let's make it even harsher, to the point that it was ruled by you unconstitutional.
That's true. And there was a second half to your question. You said, what did people say last night that was wrong? Well, Mayor Bloomberg said, when I realized it was bad toward the end, I ended it and dropped 95%. That is not accurate. In the last 2 years or so, it began to drop dramatically. It dropped 67%, not 95%. But it wasn't because he realized, had an epiphany that it was wrong. It's because of the court rulings. That's what happened.
Right. And Joe Biden said that the Obama administration stopped it. I thought you stopped it.
Yes,
was Joe Biden correct or not?
Of course he's not. You got in just ahead of me. I was going to say that Vice President Biden was totally
lucky I'm
wrong
not in
too.
your courtroom.
That's right. He said that the Obama administration appointed a federal monitor. Totally wrong. I appointed a federal monitor in August of 2013 who didn't take office for 10 months because Mayor Bloomberg insisted on trying to appeal my ruling and getting it overturned.
So simply put, Joe Biden, in your view, took credit for something that judges actually did.
Absolutely.
Before I lose you, the other big legal issue we heard was Elizabeth Warren pressing Mike Bloomberg's use of non-disclosure agreements, including with women. Your view of that exchange, could he release those people now?
Oh, he absolutely could release those people if he chose to. Now, some of them may not wish to be released. He's right about that. Some of them want the privacy of that agreement. They don't want their stories told. But what Elizabeth Warren said correctly, give them their choice. If they're released and they choose to talk, let them talk. If they don't want to talk, that's fine too. But he's not giving them the choice. So then Vice President Biden said very clearly, very simple, release them.
Judge, this is a day and a time in our history when federal judges are in the news a lot for all kinds of reasons. They were rarely out in the public square. As a retired federal judge, you are able to be. I really appreciate you coming on the beat.
Thank you. And again, thank you for having me.
It is Friday, the 21st of February of 2020. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, I actually got a little bit more under the weather yesterday and overnight, and looks like I got a full-blown, I call it a summer cold, but winter's not quite over yet now, is it? And the quite chilly nights, the ones that are in the mid to low 30s, and the relatively warm days, those being in the upper 50s to low 60s, has wreaked havoc upon my havoc. And I have a little bit of a cold, actually not a little bit. So I don't think it's a flu. Flu generally, for me, I feel it in my joints, my knees in particular, and that's not the case. But felt a little feverish, but I didn't have a fever. I did take some. I did take an analgesic. That helped tremendously. I'm not really into taking cold medicines. By and large, I will break down and take it if an ailment is too much to handle. But I don't think I'm there yet. So if I have a bit of a hoarse voice, or yesterday I had the postnasal drip, which was really bad, and I apologize. So I apologize today ahead of time for any untoward clicks and other noises that are kind of icky. So, well, I certainly apologize. Well, it looks like they're going to have to start teaching Cyrillic in the schools. We got to catch up. You know, we're pretty behind in our Cyrillic competence, I really have to say. The DNI, McGuire, got replaced because he had a line intelligence. Actually, I think she was undersecretary. Gave a briefing to the House Intel Committee. You know, the one that Devin Nunes sits on with Adam Schiff? That one. And once again, let's remember what the DNI does. You know, they coordinate how many intelligence offices here in the States? Is it 18 more? So they take all of that information from all of those various departments, and then they coordinate it, and they put out a briefing paper for House, Senate, even the president. So the acting DNI sent his undersecretary of, I think, Intelligence Affairs to go and brief the House Intel Committee in closed session, by the way. And it turns out, we've already known this, the Russians have never left. I still have to argue with a lot of Trump bros that it's all just a hoax. We're making it up. It's the deep state that's making up this Russia thing. It's not really happening, and yet it is, and has been, and it has not stopped. So they're ratcheting it up. The intel community, the top intel community, gave a briefing to the House Intel Committee. And the Republicans on that committee, Juan Devin Nunes and others, went through the roof. Not because they don't believe that Russia is actually doing this. They don't want anyone to know. They're Vichy collaborators. We won't have to look very far this time to root out the Russian moles in both the House and Senate. We only suspected last time. Now we know. So Nancy Pelosi did put out a statement saying that we got to have a pretty harsh statement about this. I just call me a romantic. I guess maybe it's not politically feasible. But shouldn't impeachment investigations be going on right now while these crimes are being committed right in front of our face, to the point that the President of the United States seems to be pretty treasonous there in the Oval Office? I know we haven't declared war on Russia, but I got to tell you, Russia declared war on us. And if anybody in the United States is aiding and abetting that, I would call it treason. Jeez. Trump wanted to charge Obama with treason, I guess, for wearing a tan suit that one time. I'm still hearing, Trump's at his Nuremberg rally last night was whining that they ought to impeach Obama and remove him from office. No one wants to tell him. He doesn't understand anything about American government except what Vlad has taught him. And apparently you can't teach Donald Trump enough things that are obvious to us because we've known it since we were little kids. Is something entirely new to this guy. The DNI briefed Democrats on the House Intel Committee. That can't happen because, the Democrats are the enemy. And the Russians are our allies now. In fact, it's getting to the point where I think the GOP really considers if you are not for Russia taking over the United States, you are un-American. That's the kind of patriotism that they want. Wait until they get it. I'm telling you, the original Red Dawn with Patrick Swayze, I hated that movie because it was just a bunch of agitprop. Come on, jingoistic BS. But boy, you could learn from it. That mayor, that little Vichy mayor, he got lined up against the rock pile too. They all think that they're not going to be lined up against the rock pile. But they all do in the end. Always. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, that was the federal judge who ruled against stop and frisk. And as you can tell, she fact-checked Bloomberg's debate performance. She was right there. Then on the rest of the menu, Trump's own top economic advisors poured cold water on his claims of the greatest economy in the history of our country. Yeah, come on. New Mexico's Attorney General sued Google over illegally collecting personal data generated by children in violation of federal and state laws. And, as if help from Russia wasn't enough, the GOP is set to spend $10 million to make it harder for you to vote. After the break, we then move to the chef's table where the president of the Paris Saint-Germain soccer club was indicted as part of a 5-year bribery and corruption investigation linked to FIFA. I got to tell you, that's linked to Russia too. Just you wait. And without any irony, the United States blacklisted 5 Iranian officials, accusing them of preventing free and fair elections before a parliamentary vote that it branded as a sham. Well, I got to tell you, turnaround's going to be real fun on this one, isn't it? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page, from that chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page, and this is very important. If you could please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you not only help us put a big dent in our bills, but we are also able to push aside some money into the savings part so we can purchase newish machinery, as the machines that we have currently working as workhorses are really workhorses, and they're starting to wear down some. We got to put them to pasture. They won't be completely done, but their workload has to be diminished tremendously because they already are on their own. So we got to get some newish machinery here, and we thank you for your generosity over these many years, over 8 years, going on 9, of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcasting radio. And we've been able to do that because of you. So if you could afford a espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send those funds to us once a month, we will stretch those dollars beyond compare because we have a lot of practice. And once again, your generosity has allowed us to do this, and we thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that admirably, too, I might add. I, of course, take care of @Justice Putnam, and go ahead, follow me there. I do post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then link that up on social media. And if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so @Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, I apologize about kind of being low energy here, but the show must go on. Do you know that when I had my shoulder surgery several years ago, I was still able to run the station, and I put on a show when the show was in a previous incarnation, known as the After Show. Do you remember that? Way back. Nonetheless, I have made it an important part of my strategy that the show must always go on. And this has been a sentiment that I've held since I was a mere child. It doesn't matter if you're sick. It doesn't matter if you got an arm lopped off. The show must go on. So now the show is going on, and I should say, truthfully, I apologize if it sounds low energy. And there's a reason for it. Because I am. Oh, boy. Okay, well, at least I have the weekend to recover. Unfortunately, I have my granddaughter here this weekend, the eldest. She's driving now on her own. Wow. And so I'm looking forward to that visit. I'm hoping that by the time she gets here later on today, early evening, that I will have rested enough and my natural antibodies will have gone to war against whatever it is that's knocking me on my butt. So I'm hoping that I feel a little bit better. Actually, I feel a lot better from yesterday and last night. But that's when you start getting sick again, right when you think that you're better. Okay, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe and West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. I forgot to tell you, even though I'm a little under the weather, the French 77s have been mixed and poured and ready for your imbibing pleasure. So do imbibe. It's the day for it. Josh Israel, out of the American Independent, brings us this first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump's top economic advisors on yesterday, poured cold water on his claims of the greatest economy in the history of the world. Although he promised previously that his 2017 tax legislation would bring annual economic growth of 4%, 5%, and maybe 6% ultimately, Trump's Council of Economic Advisors, a hand-picked core of economic advisors and experts, now say the economy is on track for just 2.4% growth in 2020. Well, that's a lot less than 4%, 5%, and ultimately 6%. The council released its economic report of the president yesterday, Thursday, while the report optimistically predicted economic growth to rise in 2020 from its projected 2019 pace of 2.5% and to remain at or above 3% in 2022. It noted that would only happen with new measures to roll back regulations, immigration reform, and new trade deals. Well, I actually think there's another way to roll that back, and that would be getting rid of the traitor in the Oval Office. Let's vote him out. I'd like to convict him and throw him in jail, but, one thing before another, right? Without those, the advisors admitted, growth will likely drop to just 2.4% for 2020 and 2.3% for 2021. With the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives passing progressive legislation and a Republican Senate blocking almost all of it, the odds of Trump getting through his desired major policy changes this year are slim. The council's numbers fell well short of both Trump's promises as a candidate and his bullish projections after the GOP-led Congress passed his 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Oh, you mean that fraudulent bill that stole money from a bunch of people? You mean that one? Trump's 2016 campaign website said he could boost growth to 3.5% per year on average, with the potential to reach a 4% growth rate. Well, that sounds like the promise he made at Trump University. He told Fox News in March of 2016 that economic growth of 4 or 5% was absolutely doable. Yeah, what does he know? He's a mobster. That October, in the final general election debate, Trump's promises got even grander. We're bringing GDP from really 1%, which it is now, up to 4%. And I actually think we could go higher than 4%. I think you could go to 5 or 6%. As he signed his tax bill in December of 2017, cutting taxes for the very rich and large corporations, Trump told the nation the changes would fuel growth that would rise 3% to 4, 5, and maybe even 6% ultimately. Trump's economy has not come close to living up to those promises. The Bureau of Economic Analysis announced last month that in the third and fourth quarters of 2019, the economy slowed to just 2.1% growth. The nation's gross domestic product grew 2.3% for the year compared to 2.9% in 2018. In September of 2018, Trump invented a phony quote from President Barack Obama, falsely claiming his predecessor once said he would never achieve 4.2% growth and boasting that he would do even better. In reality, Obama's 2016 comment had been about manufacturing jobs, not GDP. During his 2 terms in office, Obama achieved quarterly growth of at least 4.2% on 3 separate occasions. In no year of Trump's administration has the economy hit even 3% annual growth. Susan Montoya Bryan of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. New Mexico's Attorney General sued Google yesterday, Thursday, over allegations that tech company is illegally collecting personal data generated by children in violation of federal and state laws. The lawsuit, filed in U.S. District Court in Albuquerque, claims Google is using its education services package that is marketed to school districts, teachers, and parents as a way to spy on children and their families. Well, if you can get the kid to whine about a product, the parent usually will relent. It's been done since our consumer idea came into full force when media was able to get into everybody's brain. Attorney General Hector Balladares said that while the company touts Google Education as a valuable tool for resource-deprived schools, it is a means to monitor children while they browse the internet in the classroom and at home on private networks. He said, the information being mined includes everything from physical locations to websites visited, videos watched, saved, passwords, and contact lists. The state is seeking unspecified civil penalties. Student safety should be the number one priority of any company providing services to our children, particularly in our schools, Balladares said in a statement. Tracking student data without parental consent is not only illegal, it is dangerous. Google dismissed the claims as factually wrong, saying the G Suite for Education package allows schools to control account access and requires that schools obtain parental consent when necessary. We do not use personal information from users in primary and secondary schools to target ads, said company spokesman Jose Castaneda. School districts can decide how best to use Google for Education in their classrooms, and we are committed to partnering with them. Oh, except some school districts have gone ahead and just I'm serious. They went ahead and turned on the camera in these little kids' computers so they can spy on them at home. Weird stuff. Unlike Europe, the U.S. has no overarching national law governing data collection and privacy. Instead, it has a patchwork of state and federal laws that protect specific types of data, such as consumer health, financial information, and the personal data generated by young children. The Attorney General's office filed a similar lawsuit against Google and other tech companies in 2018, targeting what Balladares described as illegal data collection from child-directed mobile apps. That case is still pending in federal court, but the companies have denied wrongdoing. The latest lawsuit claims that more than 80 million teachers and students use Google's education platform. And Balladares said in a letter to New Mexico school officials that there was no immediate harm if they continue using the products and that the lawsuit should not interrupt activities in the classroom. Josh Israel of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Donald Trump's re-election campaign and the RNC have announced plans to spend more than $10 million in support of restrictive voting laws and to recruit a cadre of lawyers to monitor the 2020 elections. Oh, you mean intimidate? The strategy includes defending Michigan laws that make voting more difficult. One bans arranging rides to the polls for anyone who is not physically able to walk, while another restricts people from mailing in absentee ballots for others. These prohibitions are currently being challenged by Democratic Super PAC Priorities USA, which says they put a severe burden on people voting. In a court filing submitted on Wednesday, the GOP defends them as constitutionally valid statutes that the legislature has enacted to help structure and ensure the integrity of the electoral environment. Oh, you mean suppress the vote. Similar challenges are underway in other states with restrictive voting laws, and RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel, Mitt Romney's relative, She told Political they would fight them all. Democrats are trying to rig the game with frivolous lawsuits that have nothing to do but create electoral chaos, waste taxpayer money, and distract election officials in an attempt to advance the Democrats' voter suppression myth because they know they can't beat President Trump at the ballot box, McDaniel claimed. Well, we can and we will, but he has a lot of help from Vlad now, doesn't he? No wonder you want to suppress the vote, because the only way we can beat Vlad is when we come out in enormous numbers like we did in 2018. These actions are very dangerous, and we will not stand idly by while Democrats try to sue their way to victory in 2020. And this comes on the heels of Trump saying, hey, if I wasn't president, I'd be suing everybody. In fact, I'm going to sue everybody anyway, and he is. While Republicans have long railed against voter fraud, studies have found it is virtually non-existent. In recent years, the GOP has pushed for strict voter identification laws, reductions in the number of days available for early voting, cuts to the number of available polling places, and other measures aimed at making it hard for traditionally Democratic constituencies to vote. All of this would go away if we played tit for tat now, wouldn't it? Yes, it would. Actually, it would go away, but our people would be thrown in jail. Traditionally, it has always been Republicans suppressing votes in places. Justin Clark, a senior counsel to Trump's 2020 election campaign, admitted in December. Let's start protecting our votes. We know where they are. Let's start playing offense a little bit. That's what you're going to see in 2020. It's going to be a much bigger program, a much more aggressive program, a much better funded program. Oh, do you have translators in Cyrillic so you know exactly what it says? That month, the House of Reps passed the Voting Rights Advancement Act, a bill to restore voting right protections decimated by a 2013 Supreme Court ruling. Just one House Republican voted for the bill. 186 voted against it. Moscow Mitch McConnell has vowed to block the bill and hundreds of others that the House passed from even coming up for a vote in the GOP-controlled Senate. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, No Country for Old Comic Fans. I now work on the assumption that the DC movie universe hates its heroes. I think they want to produce a series of A Clockwork Oranges minus any satire or irony. Just a string of Alex's the Large gleefully engaging in a little ultraviolence. To that end, Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn, directed by Kathy Yan, written by Bumblebee's Christina Hodson, and produced by and starring Margot Robbie, works well. If you are a fan of the Birds of Prey comic and the works of Chuck Dixon, Greg Land, Ed Bennies, and the heroic job of writer Gail Simone, know that none of that is in this movie. Instead, what we get is Harley Quinn, not a part of the original comic. Harley Quinn narrating, Harley Quinn cavorting, Harley Quinn drinking, fighting, mentoring, fighting again, kicking someone in the crotch, breaking the fourth wall. In fact, I don't know why they tack the Birds of Prey moniker on this film instead of just doing a Harley Quinn movie. Just take this film's opening premise that Harley has broken up with the Joker, and, with him out of the picture, it's open season on her for everyone with a grudge. Give it a thin plot like Harley's got to get to the docks where there's a boat that can get her out of Gotham, and then have what you clearly want. Harley running a gauntlet of hyperviolent escapades played for laughs for the chronically desensitized. Just drop the other characters who share little more than a name with their comic counterparts and are not as interesting, which is the real sin. As it is, Birds of Harley feels like two films smushed together, the fantabulous Quinn emancipation and the Birds of Prey B-picture. That said, the young woman I spoke to after the show, who neither knew nor cared about the source material, loved the film. Okay, she's the audience for this movie, not me. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. Thousands of years ago, in what's now the Kimberley region of Western Australia, Aboriginal artists created elaborate rock paintings. Much of the artwork still exists today.
If you're walking beside the rivers and creeks and go up into the escarpments, into rock shelters, there are just thousands of rock art sites.
University of Melbourne geochronologist Damien Finch. The oldest paintings depict plants and animals, but later works show human figures in ceremonial attire and ornate headdresses.
And then around the arms and the elbows and the knees, there's decorations. And sometimes I'll be holding a clutch of boomerangs. And very often they're very finely executed using quite long and elegant looking brushstrokes.
The human-centered paintings represent what's known as the Gwion style. How old the artwork is has remained a mystery, however. That's because the typical method for estimating the age of ancient objects, radiocarbon dating, relies on the presence of organic carbon. But the artists used ochre pigments that had no organic carbon.
There is nothing organic that we can apply carbon dating to. So the only thing that we can do is look for stuff that's either been constructed on top of or underneath the paintings.
That's where mud wasps come in. The insects often incorporated organic matter into their nests, which they built on the same rock faces where artists painted. The artists would sometimes paint right on top of old nests. Finch and his colleagues were thus able to date the artwork by sampling the remains of those nests.
If it was over the top of the painting, that tells us the painting has to be older than that nest. But if the nest was underneath paint, the painting must be younger than the age that we determined for that nest. And in that way, we can help to build up an idea of when these paintings were created.
The analysis revealed that most of the Gwion-style paintings sampled were about 12,000 years old.
So now we can place that in the context of all the other archaeological and environmental information that we've got for the Kimberley region at that time.
The study is in the journal Science Advances. The results provide support for the hypothesis that Aboriginal artists may have switched from painting plants and animals to depicting humans in ceremonial dress around 12,000 years ago in response to the ecological changes and rapidly rising sea levels as the last ice age ended. Finch is now working out the age of other styles of Aboriginal rock art, with a little help from materials that ancient insects once called home. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwan is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with three things. One, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
All forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-hee. I've been talking today with Seung-hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Did you know that when you vote for president, you're actually not voting for your candidate?
I'm Tom Hartman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Sorry if this is unsettling news, but what's really happening is that you're voting for electors to the Electoral College who have pledged to vote for your candidate and will, presumably, if your candidate wins the popular vote. It's a winner-take-all system, usually statewide, although in Maine and Nebraska, each congressional district decides one electoral vote. But sometimes electors don't vote as they had promised to do. Indeed, in 2016, 7 so-called faithless electors, 5 pledged to Trump and 2 to Clinton, jumped ship and voted for neither of those candidates, which didn't matter because the Electoral College vote wasn't that close. But in another year, a switch in a handful of electoral votes could actually decide who becomes president. In 2000, for example, the final Electoral College vote was 271 for Bush, 266 for Gore. Historical precedent supports the idea that electors indeed can change their mind and vote for whoever they please. That said, the Supreme Court, which previously has never decided this issue, has just taken a case from Washington State which raises it precisely. A decision is expected by June. Way better, to be sure, than the case being before the court in November, when the electoral outcome could hang in the balance.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because democracy and advocacy begin with you, and freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On This day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the National Lawyers Guild held their first convention in the nation's capital. The Guild was established as a way to bring together progressive lawyers dedicated to fighting for basic and progressive change in our political and economic system and to assure that human rights be regarded as more sacred than property interests. Members were admitted regardless of race, sex, or political beliefs. The early Guild stood up for FDR's New Deal reforms like a full Social Security program against the staunch opposition of the American Bar Association. From its inception, protecting the rights of working people has been an important effort for the Guild. At the first convention, they passed a resolution supporting the rights of working people to organize and collectively bargain. Guild lawyers supported the founding of both the United Auto Workers and the Congress of Industrial Organizations. They also stood up for civil rights, adopting an anti-lynching resolution at their first convention. During the civil rights era, they provided legal aid for activists and fought for voting rights. This made them a target during the 1950s Cold War anti-communist hysteria. The FBI targeted the Guild for investigation. By 1955, the Guild had dropped to just 500 members. In the 1970s, the Guild successfully sued to find out the extent of FBI spying. They discovered that 1,000 informants had generated FBI files of 400,000 pages on the Guild and its members. Despite this harassment, the Guild has kept up its fight for working people. The organization has opposed anti-worker legislation from Taft-Hartley to the passage of NAFTA. In 2012, the Guild celebrated its 75th anniversary stronger than ever.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. The Labour movement is hailing the European Union's recently announced initiative on the climate crisis as a positive step forward, but says much work is left to do. The EU has released a preliminary document entitled the European Green Deal, which will address the needs of 11 million workers who are directly affected. To find out more about the EU's Green Deal, I talked to Benjamin Denis. Mr. Denis is a policy advisor with Industrial European Union. The federation represents 7 million workers in 200 European unions. I asked Mr. Denis to describe the European Green Deal.
The European Green Deal is actually the main project of the new European Commission that started its mandate a couple of months ago in December. The Green Deal is made of a long list of initiatives that should essentially put the EU on track to be carbon neutral and circular, becoming a circular economy by 2050. To quote the words of Ursula von der Leyen, the new president of this European Commission, this is the man on the moon moment of the EU. It gives you a little bit the idea of the level of ambition which is behind the Green Deal. So at this stage, we have to on the one hand acknowledge that this is really positive to see the EU having such an ambitious project to mobilize its member states and the citizens to achieve something positive in the context of Brexit and the other crisis that the EU has gone through for the last years. This is something that we welcome. It's much more positive than the austerity agenda which has driven the previous commissions. I would like to stress another positive dimension of the Green Deal. It's obviously the willingness to put the social dimension, energy poverty, inequalities, and of course employment at the core of the project. For the first time in many years, we see a European Commission starting with social dimension being a core chapter of main project. It's not anymore as well as a chapter of, I would say, traditional neoliberal greenwashing exercise. Now, the truth of the pudding is in the eating, and we know that we have to be extremely careful, extremely demanding in the next month, because we mainly have words, but what we need, of course, is to see action and tangible resources. Now, we have to say, on the other hand, that at this stage there are a lot of uncertainties which remain for different reasons, but mainly because at this stage the Green Deal is 24 pages document made of something like 20, 30 possible initiatives. We have an indicative timeline, but for the rest, there are a lot of question marks floating around.
Within the European Green Deal, which you have just described, there is the Just Transition Mechanism. What is the Just Transition Mechanism, and why is it needed?
The Just Transition Mechanism, which has been proposed by the Commission, is basically a mechanism to support people and regions that might be impacted by decarbonization. Without entering into too many details, it's a mechanism that will use the EU budget as well as other financial instruments of the European Union to support regions that are highly dependent on fossil fuel and fossil fuel-related activities such as coal mining, coal-based power production, and so on and so forth, helping them to diversify their economy and to create new activities. In other words, to deal with the social and economic challenges that might be triggered by decarbonization.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our features and daily newscasts on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Marc Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be a tad warmer than yesterday, looking in the mid-60s, which may happen. Overnight lows will remain in the mid to low 30s through the weekend, and highs should be in the low to mid 60s, though on Sunday we have our forecast of rain back. They had taken it off, and now we have it back, and it looks like we may have something considerably more than 1/10 of an inch. Doesn't seem like much, but we'll take any amount indeed. Pollen locally is rated at none. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that winds will be light and variable throughout the weekend. And let's see. I got to scroll up here a little bit. And it is out of the southwest. Okay, it took me a little while to get that to come up. But yes, winds are light and variable out of the southwest and will remain so throughout the weekend. Okay, once again, pollen locally is rated at none. The air quality index is good, though it's gone up a bit at 43 parts per million. And the daytime UV index remains moderate at 3. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.22 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 76%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 52 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 51 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 62 and sunny. Kyiv is 40 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 43 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 62 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 50 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 27 degrees Fahrenheit. And they call that fair. Huh. Well, that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. First amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, is brought to us by Graham Dunbar of the AP. The president of the Paris Saint-Germain soccer club was indicted yesterday, Thursday, as part of a 5-year bribery and corruption investigation linked to FIFA. Nasser Al-Khelaifi, a Qatari who also runs the Doha-based broadcaster beIN Media, was charged in Switzerland in connection to a bribery investigation linked to World Cup television rights. Swiss federal prosecutors also charged former FIFA Secretary General Jerome Valcke with bribery, and an unidentified third person was also charged. Al-Khelaifi was implicated for allowing Valcke to use a luxury villa on the Italian island of Sardinia rent-free in 2014 and 2015. At the time, Valcke had some influence over FIFA broadcast deals, including an extension of beIN's Middle Eastern rights for the 2026 and the 2030 World Cups. The Office of Switzerland's Attorney General filed an indictment charging Al-Khelaifi with inciting Valcke to commit aggravated criminal management. It is not clear if Al-Khelaifi will be arrested or what kind of sentence or fine he could face.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Daphne Saladekas and Humera Pamuk of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. blacklisted 5 Iranian officials, accusing them of preventing fair and free elections a day before the parliamentary vote that it branded a sham, and that's happening today, by the way. Iran's election campaign ended yesterday, Thursday, ahead of the vote seen as a popularity test for the clerical establishment at a time when relations with Washington are at their worst since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The U.S. Treasury Department said in a statement it imposed sanctions on the officials, members of Iranian's Guardian Council, and its Election Supervision Committee over their role in disqualifying several thousand candidates. Many of them were Iranians who questioned the supreme leader's policies, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a statement, referring to those rejected from running. This process is a sham. It is not free or fair, Pompeo said. Well, how about pointing the finger at yourself, Mike? My God. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and for the week. But you do know we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday. Yes, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.